Okay, I want us to start right from the beginning using the Swing classes. And if you look at the Oracle tutorial, they really are pushing you to use the NetBeans IDE right from the beginning. There's a problem with that. If you build a project in NetBeans that has a life of any kind, you're maybe going to want to switch it from NetBeans to another IDE, and it's very, very painful. So there are NetBeans generated files that are specific to NetBeans when you use their drag and drop GUI editor, and it's a problem. We don't need to do it. We don't need to use that anyway. So understanding Swing components, you could just start in here, and what we're going to do now is to just build a very simple Java application that doesn't use any tools, so that we can look at the bare bones of how to build the smallest possible interface in Java and handle the events from it. So what I've done is I've built a very small Java application, and there are different ways of doing it, and they all seem to be a little bit different. So I'm going to create a class that extends JFrame. So our class is a JFrame. And here is one of the nice things about Eclipse. When you use the name of a class that it doesn't know about, you can just go and ask it to do the include for you. So I want to, that means main Swing is a JFrame. So if I want to make one of those, I can use the subclass name JFrame, my mainframe. Get it? Mainframe. Gets a new one of the class that we're in. Did you see that I hit Control Space and it knew that the only option was to put in main Swing? Control Space in Eclipse is really pretty useful. So now we have an object, my mainframe, which has a whole bunch of methods in it that come from JFrame. And we can do things like set the title for this mainframe to be, hey, I'm the title. And let's see, what else do we want to do? A minimum amount, I think. I'm doing some of this from memory, so it's going to be probably messy. If we set the size to, let's use 2 integers, 400 wide by 300, and I didn't play nice with, once you get used to how to interact with Eclipse, the helpers, that you can go really fast, and I'm not real good at it because I don't do this every day. So I can set the location. This is where will this application pop up. So I don't really care. How about 100? And I hit tab there, 100. Now if I hit the close paren, then it'll put me in the right place. So when they put those boxes up there that you're expected to fill in, you can tab to the next one. That's what I didn't do right the last time. Okay, so we've got a location for it to pop up in, and now we have to say, what do we want to do when it closes. So we're going to do set default close operation, and we're going to do JFrame exit. This is pretty common, exit on close. Okay, the last thing we have to do is to say that we want it to be visible. It's not helping me anymore. Well, let's just run that and see what it does. Okay, so here's a graphical user interface application, the simplest possible one, and I would like to be able to see the console right now. Show view console. Okay, so the application is running, and when it closes, the application is not running. Okay, so that's kind of important. If you don't tell the application to exit when you close the JFrame, then the application will continue to be running. Okay, so we have something now that is a container. The JFrame is a container. And inside the container we can put components. What are components? Buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons, button groups, color choosers, labels, lists, progress bars. Okay, look at all of the Swing components that you have available to you. And the containers like the JFrame that we just made one of. You could make an applet, but we're not going to. The JFrame, and then we can put containers, we can put components in it. Well, containers are also components. So you can put containers in containers, and containers in those containers, and containers in those containers. So you make a containment hierarchy. When your interfaces get really complicated and your layout managers get really complicated, it's worth it to put containers inside of containers so that you can have a better control over the complexity. So I'm going to make a J button. And it doesn't like that, so let's go and import. Click here. And now I'm going to add the button to the container. So you can say the name of a container, and it has an add, and one of the things you can add to a container is a component. So I'm going to add my button, which is a component. In the literal sense, it is a component. And well, let's go in small steps. Let's see what we got. Oops, what have I done? Well, I didn't notice, but it worked. This whole thing is a button. There, I'm clicking on it. That's an artifact of the layout manager. So I talked about this in a previous video. When you add components to a container in Swing, where the components land and how big they are and what they look like depends on what the layout manager is. So all containers have a layout manager associated with them, and the default one for a JFrame is called the border layout. I'm going to change it. My mainframe set layout manager to I'm going to use the flow layout manager, and it's really kind of a stupid one. Let's see what we fixed by doing that. Okay, so here's the button now in the upper center. The flow layout manager adds components to the container starting at the top in the middle, and then it starts to add them on the top, and when it runs out it will start a new row. It's not really useful unless you say, well, I want 3 buttons across the bottom or across the top, and you have a container that just goes across the top. Then the flow layout, just put 3 buttons in the in that small container across the top might make sense. For anything complicated, the flow layout doesn't work. But I'm just kind of going to be satisfied that we have a layout manager, there's a button there, and we can click on it, but it's not doing anything. So what we need to do now is to associate the button with an event handler. So every one of these widgets that can generate an event or can hear something from the user, hear a gesture from the user, it needs to have an event handler associated with it. And there are lots of different ways to do this. Let's do it in the simplest possible way first. So I'm going to make a new class, my button handler, and it's going to implement the action, what is it? Oh, because I spelled implements wrong. Implements action listener. There it is. That's really a nice helper when you can't remember stuff. Okay, so what we need to do, if we agree to implement action listener, it doesn't compile unless we do actually implement the methods that are in that interface. So if we hover over this and say add unimplemented methods, here's the method that we need. The action performed method, and it takes an action event. So that's the notation that makes sure that we got the signature of this right. So if we accidentally mistyped and thought we had overridden the method but we didn't, then the compiler would catch it because of that notation. So what do we want to do when the button is clicked? Well, nothing too fancy. Let's do SYSO control space. I hear the button. So we're going to dump that out onto the console when someone clicks the button. So there's only one thing left. This is not a very interesting thing to do when someone clicks the button, but we need to associate the button with an object of this type. So let's do it in lots of steps so that you can see it. So I'm going to make an instance of my button handler. Oh darn, MBH, don't do that at home. It's new my button handler. So I've got an object of this new type. Now I want to associate the button with the handler. The button, here it is. So my button dot add action listener and it takes something that is action listener, and I happen to have one right there called MBH. Okay, so this line of code is very important. This associates the button which can generate an event when the user clicks it to an object that has a method in it that we want to execute at the time. So without this association is what says that we are going to listen for someone to click on that button. We could have 100 buttons and not listen to any of them. But as soon as we associate this object with this object, then the event loop knows when someone clicks that button, we're going to call this the action performed method inside this object, and we're going to execute this. The event that's generated is going to be passed into the method. So this object will generate a method. Sorry, this object, the button, will generate an event. The event loop, which you have no control over, is going to call the action performed method and pass that event object into it. Well, let's see what that would give us if we just did. Let's dump that event onto the console so we can look at it when someone clicks the button. Okay, I wonder if we've got this working now. And of course, I don't have the console showing. Okay, we can hear the button. And when the button gets clicked, it prints out the event. It is an action event object. And boy, it's got the time it was clicked. It's got the command is click here. That's the text that's on the button. There is a reference to the button object, the JButton object that generated that event, and a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't really seem too interesting to me. So it's possible for you to use one handler and associate lots of objects with it. So if you got 5 buttons and you want them all to be handled by one handler, you could say my other button dot add action listener and pass in the same object. If you do that, then you will have to look at the event and find out where the event came from to know which button was clicked. People do this in different ways. Some people say, no, I don't want to. I want to have a small one for every widget that can generate an event. I want to have my own handler for that. And some people start stacking them up, and they make big switch statements inside the action performed to associate which button generated the event that was heard, or which widget. Okay, so let's start tightening this up a little bit. This is one way you could do it. You could put this class in the same file, or we could have made a mybuttonhandler.java file, or we could have made this an inner class. Let's just do that. Let's do cut and paste. Does that work? Let's see. Why doesn't that work? I think that might have to be a static inner class, and it does. So it's still the same thing. We have a class that's defined as the thing that would handle that button. Or we could have combined all of those. Maybe to demonstrate that, I'm going to make another button. And I'll call it other button. And let's add it. My mainframe dot add other button. So now we should have it on the layout. Here's the other button. It doesn't do anything. This one does. This one doesn't. So now let's make the event handler for the other button. This is an interesting technique in Java if you don't know how to make an inner class, an anonymous inner class. So we're going to compare it to how we did this. We associated my button with an object that implements the action listener. So for this next one, for the other button, we're going to call add action performed, add action listener, and instead of passing in an object as the parameter to add action listener, like we did here, we're going to define a class, and we're going to make one instance of that class, and we're going to pass it into the method all at the same time. So this is an anonymous inner class, and it allows us to associate the button with what we want the button to do without going out here and making a whole new thing. So if I say new action listener, oh, it filled it all in for me. Isn't that nice? Okay, so this syntax should be very strange to you. This is the name of an interface, and it looks like we're going to make a new object, but we're defining a new class which implements this interface. And Eclipse was nice to me. It said, well, if you want to do that, we are going to, I don't need that one. Let me back that one out there. It knew that I needed to implement this method in order to define a class that implements that interface. So I'm just going to call this E. You usually can get away with E as a name of an event. So I hear the other button. Okay, so let's look at that. This is a valuable thing to be able to do in Java, not just for user interfaces. This is the open parentheses for the method call, and this is the close parentheses for the method call. So all of this is the creation of an anonymous class. This anonymous class implements the action listener. And in one fell swoop, it makes an instance of this new class, and it passes that object to the add action listener method all at once. So, an anonymous inner class. What's the name of this class? We don't know. It's anonymous. It does actually have a name. Internally, Java has generated a name for it, and that name will have a $sign in it. You can check it if you want to. Find out what the name of your new class is. I wonder what, if I correct the indentation, let's do format. Yes, that's kind of what I thought. Whenever you see this syntax, a closed brace inside of a parentheses, you have an anonymous inner class. There's no other way to do that. So the anonymous class goes from here to here, and that's the way that you would see it formatted usually, and that's the way Eclipse wants us to do it. So let's just run this and see if, okay, my other button is now being heard, and we have a user interface with buttons on it using two different ways of achieving the same thing: the anonymous inner class as the listener, or an inner class if you want to, or that class could have been in a completely separate file, or it could have been another class inside of this same Java file, so long as it's not public. But that's a starting place if you're going to program your own interfaces in Swing, and this was the intended way of doing it, that you would never have a drag and drop editor. You would write the code that would create the user interface, and all of the layout would be done by writing code and manipulating the layout managers in code. And it's too hard. It's too hard, especially if you have worked in Visual Basic, because everyone knows that, hey, you just put the buttons where you want them and they stay there, and it takes 1 minute, and then you fill in the properties of the buttons, and it's just hard to sell that we would now be building user interfaces in Java by coding. Let's go from there. We are going to use a tool that would make it this somewhat less painful. Okay, I want to show you a tool that's available, and some other things as we go along. When you go to the Google homepage, everybody knows about searching and using Gmail and all of this. When you look under More, here are a bunch of other Google projects. YouTube is one of the Google things now. When you go under Even More, so we're getting there, we find out that there's a whole bunch of stuff not under More, but under Even More, and go to the bottom of Even More. And here's a place called Google Code, Developers Tools. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here, considering how far away it is from the usual Google place where you go to search for stuff. Okay, so Google Code is this whole project of Google, and it's got a ton of stuff in it. And dig around in here. It's oh, there's Rito Meyer. He wrote one of the popular Android programming books, which is of no value whatever. Sorry, Rito, it's just too hard to read. APIs and tools. Whole bunch of them. Google Project Hosting is really interesting. So long as you're willing to share your code with other people, you can host your project on there. Under there, there are hundreds of thousands of code projects under there. Maybe I shouldn't tell you that, because you can almost search for whatever you can think of is already done. Well, I know if you're like me, I can hardly come in here without having a few hours to just look around. And I didn't find the one that I wanted to, so I'm just going to search for it. I want Window Builder. Well, here it is. Window Builder Pro. Still free, even though it's called Pro. And this is kind of a misnomer because when you download it, you're not really going to download it from in the usual sense. You are going to go and get one of these links and put it in your Eclipse. So wow, I can't even remember which Eclipse I'm using on this machine. I've got 3 machines running Eclipse, so let's go over here and make sure that in this version of Eclipse, what am I using? Well, this is not very intuitive at all, just to find out which Eclipse I have. I found out that I have 3.5 on this machine. I don't think that that is the newest one. I don't really care right now, but I have to get the right one of those links. 3.5. So let's go back to the WindowBuilderPro. Oh, I'm still on Galileo. Could that be? Maybe I launched the wrong one when I sat down here. That's okay. Let's take that link. Hopefully you're on Indigo, maybe Helios, but I seem to be still on Galileo here. That's okay. Take the link that's appropriate for your version and copy it. Then go into Eclipse. Under Help, we're going to say Install New Software. And I am going to paste that link here. And I'm going to call it WindowBuilderPro. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but it better be something that you can remember. So it will go out and get the stuff that you need. And, well, there are some that we don't need, for sure. We're going to use the Swing Designer tools. The SWT, I'd kind of forgotten about that. That was a competing set of tools made by an Eclipse group to compete with the Swing tools because they didn't always work. And largely out of IBM, a group went and started from the beginning and made a complete set of GUI builder tools called the SWT. So you have to go and get this, the engine. So this is typical of how you add a plugin to your Eclipse environment. You go and you find the URL, and then you just paste that URL into, under the Help menu, Install New Software. So I'm going to just allow it to add these things. I read all of this. I studied it, and I had a lawyer look at it, and I know it's fine, so I'll accept the terms, and I will install those things. Occasionally during the installation, you'll get one of these messages that says that it's unsigned, and I always just say okay. So this takes a little while. I won't make you watch all of this. Oh, well, it's done. Restart Eclipse. And there's no reason not to. We have time, right? Okay, so this is how you add a plugin to Eclipse, and this is one of the advantages of using Eclipse. You can go out and get these tools that anyone has made. So there's just tons of Eclipse plugins, and this is one that we'll play with a little bit, WindowBuilderPro, so that you won't have quite as painful an experience of building a user interface. You don't have to code it from scratch. You don't have to use NetBeans. And for this exercise, you don't even have to use the very complicated and dynamic layout managers. Okay, so we restarted Eclipse and we have the WindowBuilderPro plugin plugged in. Let's make a project now from scratch using that. So as we start to use WindowBuilderPro, the first thing that you'll notice is that I'm not very good at it. If it makes you feel better, I'm better at actually coding in Swing than using these drag and drop interfaces. So you're going to have to spend a couple of Pomodoros in here combined with just playing around with it in Eclipse. So if we make let's make a Java project, and when you go to add something to the source, we can add a new, and now we can add under Other. We have under the options of Other, we have Window Builder. And if you installed the SWT designer, you would have another folder here, but well, we don't have any classes in here, so why don't we start out by making an application window. My main window. And already we have a whole bunch of code. So we have the main of the application, and they do this a little bit differently. You might recognize this and you might not. So they actually put another thread. They create a thread and put the creation of the window in it. Don't let that throw you, but they make an instance of the class that they're in. Here's the reference to the JFrame. It's a field in this class. So we make an instance of the class that we're in. The previous example that I did, I extended the JFrame. That probably isn't a good practice. So make a POJO, a plain old Java class, and then make an instance to a JFrame inside of it, then instantiate the class that you're in inside of the main and set visible, and that gets you to a starting place for having an application that runs. And well, let's just see what the default is. So this is kind of the hello world. Oh, I'm running out of memory because I've got that recording thing. Let me see if I can shut down something. I like to run everything at the same time, don't you? Okay, so we have the default application using the window builder. We have a new little icon up here. And now we have down at the bottom the source code and the design view. So here's the design view. This will take you a while to get used to. You click out here and select the component, and then you have the properties of that component over here. So this is a JFrame, and that is the content panel of the JFrame where we could put stuff. See if I can get a little more room out of this. Okay. So there is a layout object associated with it, and the default one is border layout. We might want to change that. So if we go in and look at the layouts that are available, one of them is absolute layout. And I'm not quite understanding what they want me to do here, but it seems like if I double click here, then I get a green plus sign over here. So what I did was I changed the layout manager for this JFrame to absolute layout. So now if I want to drop buttons on there, here's a J button. Oh, I just have to click once and then go over here. And I can put it in a very specific place, and now I can change the characteristics of the button in the properties. Click me. Now, this seems really kind of nice. Let's go back to the source code, and all the time we're over there doing stuff, it is over here generating code. That's not too bad. Remember, we wrote some code in the previous one, which really wasn't all that much different from that. Because we're using absolute layout, we have a set bounds thing for this button that we created. Why did it name it BTN new button? I wonder if I had the right to change that over here in the properties of that. Whoops, what did I do? Oh, did I double click on it? I did. I double clicked on it and it generated an event listener for me. It generated the event listener for the button. And then I could come over here and type in what I wanted for the action listener of that button. What I was really hoping to do was to change the name, the variable name of the button. Here I can do it here. My other name. So tell me that it went back to all the source code and renamed that. And it did. That's kind of nice. That's kind of nice. Okay, it will take you a while to get used to using this design. And your objective for the immediate time is to not so much to work on the main window. This is the application window, the J-frame, but you're going to be designing a dialog. So how would we do that? How would we get started with making a dialog? Let's go back to where we can see the project stuff. If I say new, other, I want a J dialog, and the name of it is going to be use car dialog. And do I want an OK and a cancel button? Sure, let's see what that does. Well, I get quite a bit of stuff. Look at the format of this code. A set of braces here and a set of braces here. I wonder if you start changing that. So we have an OK button and a cancel button down here in a very nice way, probably conforming to the requirements. I mean the Java look and feel requirements. So this is a big advantage. What is the default layout for a what is this guy? A J dialog. The default layout for the content panel of the J dialog is a flow layout. You can't really see it. So when you're adding stuff here, you're going to be adding stuff using the flow layout unless you change that. So if you start adding buttons, look where flow layout puts them. And let's put a text area. With nothing in it. There's a checkbox. when flow layout runs out of space, it just goes to the next line, and that's dynamic. If you change the size of the pane, I wonder if I can do that over here. No. That's okay. If you change the size of the panel, these buttons would jump around according to the rules of the layout manager, in this case the flow layout. That's not really what I hope would happen. So my thinking is, you can use absolute layout. Everybody says, no, don't do that. A J-frame really should have a border layout, and then for the center one, the center panel, you could use an absolute layout. I really got good at one time of using box layout. It would take, I don't know, some weeks of work to be good at box layout, and the hardest one is grid bag. It's a very flexible layout manager, and you know what that means. If it's flexible, you're going to be able to do anything, and it's going to be really complicated, like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. I forget exactly how that went, sorry. Spider-Man fans. Okay, so this is you getting started. Here's a bunch of code that was generated by WindowBuilderPro. Good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing your discussions on the discussion panel in this coming week, and looking forward to seeing the interfaces that you build using the look and feel guidelines. The link for those is in the assignment. It's just Google for Java look and feel design guidelines, and oh, what happened there? Google Java look and feel design guidelines. If you come to guidelines homepage, it takes you to an Oracle page which still has java.sun on it, and then this is volume 1, and the thing that I was most interested in for you this time at least is the visual design. So the layout and the visual alignment. So chapter 4 in the look and feel design guidelines. Okay, sorry I flailed around and wasted time on that. I'm going to let you go and do that yourself. Very good. Looking forward to what you come up with.